Imagine enduring endless days and nights surrounded by death, trapped in knee-deep mud so thick it swallows men whole, while rats feast on the corpses piling up around you. This wasn't some twisted nightmare. It was the brutal reality for millions of soldiers during World War I. The trenches of the Western Front weren't just military strategy. They were a waking hell that pushed human endurance beyond comprehension. And hey, if you're hooked on these stories, smash that like button or subscribe. Seriously, I'm dying to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment with your location and local time. It blows my mind imagining folks drifting off to sleep listening to this from every corner of the globe. Alright, let's catapult back to 1916. Buckle up, it's gonna be a wild ride. But first, get cozy. I mean it. Fluff those pillows, wrap yourself in a blanket, because where we're headed, you'll want every bit of comfort you can scrape together. So, congratulations. You've just woken up in a frontline trench on the Western Front. Your eyelids flutter open to pitch-black darkness. The air is thick with damp cold, seeping through the scratchy wool of your uniform. This isn't a bed. You're crammed into a shallow dugout carved into the trench wall, just deep enough to fit your body. The hard-packed earth beneath you has numbed your hip, and there's a relentless drip, drip, drip of water from somewhere above, landing maddeningly close to your face. Not exactly the cozy nest you're curled up in now, huh? Then it hits you, the smell. Oh God, the smell. It's a vile cocktail of unwashed bodies, human waste, rotting flesh, gunpowder residue, and the sickly sweet stench of gangrene from wounded men. This odor will cling to your nostrils, your clothes, your memories, long after you've left this place, if you ever do. You scratch your head and feel something scuttling through your hair. Lice. They're everywhere. In your hair, your uniform, your bedding. Their constant bites leave you clawing at your skin, a curse no amount of scratching can lift. The men call it the trench itch. You'll waste hours picking them off, crushing them between your nails, but they always come back. Always. The dugout is a claustrophobic hole reinforced with whatever scraps they could scavenge, splintered planks, dented metal sheets, even doors ripped from bombed-out villages. In winter, it's freezing. In summer, it's a sweatbox. It's never comfortable, but it's the closest thing to safety out here. You haul yourself out, every muscle protesting. Your uniform is damp, always damp, and your boots squelch in the mud as you stand. It's dawn, which means stand to, the most dangerous time of day, when every man must be alert, rifle loaded, bayonet fixed, braced for a possible enemy attack. The trench itself is a zigzagging maze, about 7 feet deep and 6 feet wide, stretching for miles to prevent a straight shot from enemy fire. The walls are shored up with sandbags and wooden beams, though chunks have collapsed from rain or shell blasts. Duckboards line the bottom, a feeble attempt to keep your feet above the mud and water, but it's a losing battle. When the rains come, the water can rise to your knees or higher. You're not alone. All along the trench, shadowy figures emerge from dugouts and funk holes, bleary-eyed and exhausted. Some have been on night watch and look even worse than you feel. Their faces gaunt, beards scraggly, eyes hollow with the 1,000-yard stare of men who've seen too much. Bloody hell, mutters the guy next to you, a grizzled corporal with a Manchester accent named Thomas. He's been here for 14 months already. Another day in paradise. Better get your gear sorted before the sergeant comes round. You check your equipment, a Lee Enfield rifle wrapped in cloth to keep mud out of the mechanism. It needs cleaning hourly to avoid jamming. A gas mask hanging around your neck in its canvas pouch. Never let it out of reach. A helmet weighing down your skull and pockets stuffed with ammo. A bayonet, a small shovel, a canteen, and emergency rations for when supplies run low. Suddenly, a whistle shrieks. Everyone freezes. 3 short blasts. Gas alert. Your heart jackhammers as you fumble for your mask, hands shaking. You've drilled for this, but the terror never fades. The mask is a suffocating contraption of canvas, glass eyepieces, and a filter that makes breathing feel like sucking air through a straw. But without it, you're dead. False alarm, someone shouts down the line. Just testing. Keep your wits about you, lads. The masks come off, but the fear lingers. Gas is the worst way to go, chlorine that burns your lungs from the inside, phosgene that kills you slowly, mustard gas that blisters your skin and blinds you. You've seen men die from it, their faces turning blue, foam bubbling at their lips as they beg for air that won't come. Breakfast comes the call, and men shuffle toward the cooking area, just a niche where a soldier stirs a pot over a carefully hidden flame. No smoke can escape, or it'll draw enemy fire. You're handed a tin mug of strong, sweet tea, a rare luxury, a scoop of watery porridge, and a hunk of stale but edible bread. The bread often arrives moldy, especially in summer, but hungry men scrape off the worst and choke down the rest. As you eat, rats dart across the trench floor, fat, bold, and thriving on a diet of corpses. Some are as big as cats. Men swap stories of waking to find rats gnawing at their boots, or, worse, their faces. At night, you hear them squealing and fighting over the dead. The cats brought in to control them, long since gassed or blown apart by shells. After breakfast, duties are assigned. Some men repair trench walls, others stand watch through periscopes, a few draw the dreaded latrine duty. Just a bucket in a stinking dugout that must be emptied nightly. You're put on a wiring party with 5 others. Tonight, you'll string fresh barbed wire in no man's land. Dangerous work done in darkness, exposed to enemy fire. For now, you prep materials, coils of wire, wooden stakes, mallets wrapped in cloth to muffle sound. Midday brings bully beef, corned beef, and more bread, maybe jam if you're lucky. The food is monotonous but vital. Men burn calories fast from stress, labor, and the endless cold. In the afternoon, Lieutenant Parker inspects the trench. He's young, maybe 22, but his eyes look ancient. Trench foot's taking more men than German bullets this month, he warns. Change your socks when you can. Rub well oil on your feet if supplies come through. Trench foot is a fungal horror caused by constant dampness. Your feet go numb, then swell, turn blue, and rot. If untreated, it means amputation. You've seen men carried out, their feet blackened and stinking. You make a mental note to check yours tonight. The afternoon drags. Clouds gather, threatening rain, the trench's worst enemy. When it rains, trenches flood, walls collapse, and men drown in mud, weighed down by gear. Then, at 4 p.m., the German artillery starts. First, a few test shots, then a full barrage. The ground shakes like a living thing. You press against the trench wall, making yourself small. The noise isn't just loud. It hurts, vibrating through your skull and ribs. They're softening us up for a night attack. Thomas says, crouching beside you. Gonna be a long one, lad. This is what men fear most, the helplessness of bombardment. There's nothing to do but wait, hope, and pray. A direct hit means instant death. A near miss can bury you alive or tear off limbs. The shells contain high explosives, shrapnel, or gas. Each has its own distinctive sound as it flies overhead, a sound you quickly learn to recognize and fear. Shell fragments scream through the air like angry hornets, kicking up geysers of dirt and debris with each impact. The stench of cordite burns your nostrils as you press deeper into the trench wall, praying the next blast won't land directly in your lap. After 20 minutes that feel like hours, the barrage lifts, leaving an eerie silence that rings louder than the explosions. Casualties, someone shouts. Stretcher bearers to point 4. You emerge from cover, blinking through dust and smoke. The trench is transformed. Where there was once a functional firing step, now gapes a crater. A communications dugout has collapsed entirely, with 3 men frantically digging out a 4th whose face is masked in blood but miraculously alive. Stretcher bearers arrive, hauling the wounded toward aid stations while others start the grim work of burying the dead in shell craters when possible. You join the cleanup, filling holes, rebuilding collapsed sections, retrieving scattered equipment. The work is grueling but necessary. This trench is both your home and your lifeline. As evening falls, assignments are handed out. Sentry duty from 8 p.m. to midnight, then part of the wiring party from 2 a.m. till dawn. If you're lucky, you might snatch 2 hours of sleep between shifts. Night brings a different kind of warfare. Under cover of darkness, both sides increase activity. Ration parties creep forward with supplies, wounded are evacuated, and raiding parties slip into no man's land. Your sentry shift passes uneventfully but tensely, every shadow making your trigger finger twitch. At midnight, you collapse into your dugout, too exhausted to remove boots or gear. You might need to move fast if attacked. Sleep comes instantly despite the discomfort. At 2 a.m., you're shaken awake for the wiring party, the most dangerous job on the roster. Stay low, move slow, no talking, the sergeant growls. One noise out there, and we're all dead. Climbing over the top into no man's land feels like stepping onto another planet. The moonlit wasteland is a graveyard of shell holes, rusted wire, and decomposing bodies. You crawl on your belly through mud that reeks of death, passing corpses frozen in grotesque poses, some still clutching toward friendly lines in their final moments. The work is agony. Barbed wire tears at your gloves and uniform as you stake new coils, every metallic ping sounding deafening in the silence. When German flares burst overhead, you freeze mid-motion, becoming part of the landscape until darkness returns. 3 hours later, the job's done, but one man doesn't make it back. Caught in the wire he was repairing when a machine gun opened up. Dawn finds you back at the firing step, rifle ready, watching the sunrise illuminate the nightmare terrain between trenches. The officers drop the hammer. We're going over the top tomorrow at dawn. A cold weight settles in your gut. Over the top means climbing into no man's land and charging enemy lines. A suicide mission against machine guns. Thomas passes you a cigarette with steady hands. First time, he asks, though he knows the answer. Look at the men beside you when you go. Don't think, just move with them. As morning unfolds, the trench hums with grim preparation. Some men write final letters. Others obsessively clean rifles. A few crack jokes too loudly. The lieutenant briefs the raiding party, 12 men tasked with grabbing German prisoners. They blacken their gear, sharpen trench knives, and practice silent signals. You need at least 2 prisoners, the officer stresses. And if you're hit, die quiet. Don't get everyone killed screaming. At 11:30 p.m., the raiders vanish into darkness. Minutes later, grenade blasts and German shouts erupt. Your covering party opens fire, bullets snapping overhead to suppress enemy reinforcements. Flares reveal shadowy figures dragging 2 struggling Germans back. Mission accomplished, but 2 raiders didn't return. The prisoners, terrified Bavarian teenagers, are hauled away for interrogation. The survivors gulp rum rations with shaking hands, their laughter edged with hysteria. This is trench combat, brutal, intimate, and utterly merciless. The morning after the raid dawns unnaturally quiet, the kind of tense calm that veterans know precedes a storm. You're cleaning your rifle for the 10th time when the first shells whistle in. But these don't sound like the usual high explosives. There's a wet, hollow plop instead of the familiar shriek. Gas. The scream rips through the trench. Chlorine incoming. You're moving before conscious thought kicks in, muscle memory from endless drills. The mask's rubber seals with a sickening suction against your face as the first yellow-green tendrils slither over the parapet. Through fogging eyepieces, you watch the cloud ooze into shell holes and dugouts, heavier than air, seeking every low point. Someone 3 bays down isn't fast enough. His choking screams turn to wet gurgles before stretcher bearers drag him away. For 30 suffocating minutes, you breathe through the filter's chemical tang, counting each heartbeat. When the all-clear finally comes, you rip off the mask to vomit. Half from swallowed fumes, half from the sight of 3 men convulsing in the aid station, their lips gone blue. Infantry following the gas. The warning comes as you're wiping bile from your chin. Through lingering haze, gray uniforms emerge, Germans in their own grotesque masks, filter canisters making them look like inhuman insects. You're on the firing step before the order comes, aiming at shapes half seen through poison and smoke. The machine guns open up first, their staccato rhythm vibrating through the trench floor. Fire at will. Your first shot kicks the rifle hard, no time to check if it hit. Work the bolt. Eject the smoking casing. Breathe. Fire again. A German stumbles as your bullet tears through his thigh, but his comrades keep coming, throwing stick grenades with those damned wooden handles. One lands at your feet. You kick it blindly into a traverse just before detonation. The blast knocks you sideways, ears ringing, but the sandbags absorb the worst. When vision clears, the attack's faltering. Germans scramble back through their own gas, some dragging wounded, others left twitching in the wire. By midday, the trench reeks of sweat, vomit, and lingering gas. The stretcher bearers work nonstop. Those who can walk help carry. You pass a medical orderly injecting morphine into a man whose lungs sound like wet paper bags. "They'll live," he mutters, "if you call this living." The lieutenant moves through the carnage with a clipboard, tallying losses. "Holding action tonight," he tells your section. "Jerry'll try again after sunset." As predicted, the Germans probe at dusk. Not a full assault, but sharp, professional raids testing weak spots. Your sentry shift becomes a deadly game of spotting movement in the murk. Twice you fire at shadows. Once, a real shape crumples with a grunt. At midnight, blessed relief arrives, a fresh battalion to take over the line. The handover is rushed, hushed. Saxons moved in opposite, their sergeant warns. Nasty bastards, they bayonet wounded. The march to reserve trenches feels surreal. After days in the front lines stink, even the reeking latrines of the support zone smell sweet. A cook hands out stew with actual meat chunks, some scrawny chicken, probably, and for the first time in a week, you taste something besides bully beef and fear. Sleep comes in a bombed-out farmhouse, your body curled on a straw mattress that might as well be a palace bed. Yet when you close your eyes, the nightmares come. Gas masks that won't seal, grenades with endlessly burning fuses, the sound of men drowning in their own lungs. You wake at dawn unrest, but alive. For now, that's enough. The rest area should feel like salvation after the front lines, but the war's shadow lingers. Even here, 5 miles behind the trenches, the distant thunder of artillery is a constant reminder that this respite is temporary. The village, what's left of it, is a skeleton of its former self, buildings pockmarked by shrapnel, roads cratered from stray shells. But compared to the trenches, it might as well be the Ritz. Your platoon is billeted in a half-collapsed farmhouse, its roof patched with tarpaulins that snap in the wind. The farmer and his wife move like ghosts among the soldiers, their eyes hollow with a grief no one dares ask about. The first order of business is hygiene, a luxury you'd nearly forgotten. "Bathhouse is in the barn," announces a corporal, jerking his thumb toward a leaning structure. "Hot water's rationed, so make it quick." The line stretches halfway across the farmyard. Men joke about the layers of grime they're shedding. Might plant potatoes in this filth. But the laughter is too loud, too forced. When your turn comes, the water turns gray within seconds. You scrub until your skin burns, as if you could scour away not just the dirt, but the memories clinging to it. Clean uniforms weighed in stacks, stiff with starch and smelling faintly of lye. The delousing station has steamed your old clothes, but the stench of the trenches lingers in the fibers like a stubborn stain. You dress slowly, savoring the unfamiliar sensation of fabric that doesn't stick to your skin with sweat and fear. Mail call is the day's true redemption. The company clerk reads names from a battered clipboard, distributing letters and parcels like a priest offering communion. When your name is called, you clutch the envelopes, one from your mother, another from a childhood friend, as if they're made of gold. Later, tucked into a corner of the barn, you devour the words. Your mother writes of rationing back home, the neighbor's new baby, her rose bushes, mundane details that feel like artifacts from another life. Your friend's letter mentions a mutual acquaintance who lost an arm at Ypres but survived. You traced the handwriting with your finger, imagining the hand that held this paper was recently in England, touching a world that now seems as distant as the moon. Dinner is a revelation. Actual hot stew with carrots and onions, fresh bread that doesn't break teeth, even a smear of butter. The cooks, emboldened by their audience, unveil a surprise: plum duff pudding, stodgy and sweet, that has men cheering like they've won the war. Save some for the rats, jokes a lance corporal, licking his tin clean. Evening brings the rum ration, a thimbleful of liquid courage that burns all the way down. The veterans sip theirs slowly, making it last. The younger men knock it back like medicine. Someone produces a mouth organ, and soon the barn fills with off-key renditions of It's a Long Way to Tipperary. The singing is terrible, the camaraderie perfect. But war doesn't allow pure joy. During a lull, Thomas sits beside you, rolling a cigarette with surgeon-like precision. "Got a brother at loose," he says abruptly. "Haven't heard from him in 8 weeks." He doesn't need to elaborate. The silence between you says everything. About loss, about waiting, about the cruel arithmetic of hope. Later, in the straw-strewn loft that serves as a barracks, men trade stories in the dark. Not war stories. Those are taboo, but tales of home, of first kisses, of stupid pranks pulled in school. The lies are generous and obvious. "I swear the trout was this big." The laughter real for the first time in weeks. You fall asleep to the sound of rain on canvas, a clean rifle within arm's reach, and the unshakable knowledge that in 72 hours, you'll be marching back toward hell. The march back to the front begins at dawn under a sky the color of wet slate. Rain slicks the cobblestones of the village square as the battalion forms up, each man checking his neighbor's gear with the quiet intensity of those who know what awaits. The farmer's wife stands in her doorway, clutching a shawl around her shoulders, not waving, just watching, as if memorizing your faces for some future reckoning. 5-minute intervals between companies, barks the adjutant. Keep noise discipline past the crossroads. The road deteriorates with every mile. What begins as a proper paved surface soon becomes a rutted track, then a muddy gash littered with the detritus of war, abandoned ammunition crates, shell fragments, the occasional boot with its grisly contents still inside. The column moves in near silence, broken only by the creak of equipment and the squelch of boots in mud. By midday, the rain has turned the road into a quagmire. Men sink to their ankles with each step, their packs growing heavier with absorbed moisture. A wagon ahead gets stuck, its wheels spinning uselessly until a dozen soldiers put their shoulders to it. The driver, a boy who can't be older than 16, keeps apologizing until a sergeant growls at him to shut up. You pass a field hospital, its tents flapping in the wind. Through the open flaps, you glimpse rows of cots, the flash of a surgeon's saw, a pile of stained bandages taller than a man. A medical orderly smoking outside meets your gaze and shakes his head slightly. A warning, or maybe just acknowledgement of the unspoken truth. Some of you will be back here soon enough. The landscape grows increasingly apocalyptic. Trees are reduced to splintered toothpicks, fields to cratered moonscapes. A church spire leans at a drunken angle, its cross dangling upside down like some macabre joke. Even the birds seem to have abandoned this place. The only sounds are the wind and the ever-present rumble of the guns. At the crossroads, military police in their red caps direct traffic with the brisk efficiency of subway conductors. One checks the lieutenant's orders before pointing down a communication trench that vanishes into the mist. "Welcome to the Grand Hotel," mutters Thomas as you descend into the earth. The trench is worse than you remembered. Rain has turned the floor into a chocolate-colored slurry that sucks at your boots with each step. The duckboards float in places, requiring careful navigation to avoid plunging knee-deep into the muck. The walls weep muddy tears, and the smell, a miasma of wet earth, human waste, and something sweetly rotten, hits like a physical blow. Relief is a hurried affair. The outgoing battalion looks like survivors of some disaster, their eyes sunken, uniforms stiff with dirt. Their sergeant points out weak spots in the wire, recent sniper positions, the latrine that's likely to collapse if you look at it wrong. "Bosch have been quiet since the gas attack," he says, handing over a grimy map. "But they've got a new machine gun post here. Cost us 3 men finding that out." By midnight, the trench is yours. You take your first watch standing on a crate to peer over the parapet, the rain stinging your face. Somewhere out in no man's land, a flare pops. bathing the wasteland in ghastly white light. For a heartbeat, you see it all: the craters, the wire, the broken bodies, before darkness swallows everything again. A rat scuttles along the trench wall, pausing to sniff the air. You could swear it's sizing you up, calculating how long until you're part of its larder. Next time, you whisper to it, "Bring your own damn dinner." Dawn breaks like a slow bruise across no man's land. First a sickly yellow, then the color of old blood seeping through bandages. You've been on watch for 2 hours, your fingers gone numb around the rifle, when the first mortar round comes shrieking in. Minnewerfer. The cry goes up seconds before impact. The German trench mortar shell lands with a wet thump just beyond the parapet, showering your position with clods of earth and something warm that might be human remains. Before you can wipe the filth from your eyes, 3 more follow in quick succession, walking their way down the trench line like a butcher methodically cleaving meat from bone. Get to the traverse. Thomas yanks you backward as the 4th shell obliterates the fire step where you've been standing. The concussion punches the air from your lungs. For a terrifying moment, you're convinced you've been hit, until you realize the wetness soaking your tunic is just mud, not blood. The barrage lasts 17 minutes by Thomas's pocket watch. When it lifts, the trench looks like a gutted animal. Duckboards splintered, revetments collapsed, and in one horrific stretch, 3 men reduced to red paste smeared across the sandbags. Casualty report. The lieutenant's voice cracks on the 2nd syllable. Stretcher bearers materialize like ghosts, sorting the wounded with brutal efficiency. Walking wounded to the rear. Stretcher case for this one. Corpses to the mule track after dark. You're put on burial detail, the worst duty in the aftermath. The bodies come in pieces, a hand still clutching a rifle here, a torso wrapped around a sandbag there. One poor bastard is folded backward over a beam like a discarded ragdoll, his spine snapped at an impossible angle. The work is done in silence, broken only by the occasional retching of new replacements unaccustomed to the smell. By midday, the trench is barely functional but nominally repaired. The Germans, satisfied with their morning's work, content themselves with sporadic sniper fire. You're cleaning your rifle for the 3rd time when a runner arrives with news. Relief postponed. Enemy activity at Sector 7. A collective groan ripples through the men. The promised rotation to support trenches evaporates like morning mist. Thomas just shrugs and lights another cigarette. Told you those Saxons were bastards. The afternoon brings a new horror. A low-flying German reconnaissance plane putters overhead, its black crosses clearly visible. Machine guns open up from both sides, stitching the sky with tracers. The plane banks lazily, as if amused by the antics below, before dropping 2 small bombs that crater the reserve trench. Artillery spotter spits the company sergeant major. That means incoming. Sure enough, within the hour, German shells begin walking their way toward your position with terrifying precision. The first salvo lands long, the second short, the third. The world dissolves into noise and flame. You wake sprawled in a funk hole, ears ringing, to find Thomas dragging you upright. "Still with us, lad?" His voice sounds like it's coming through wool. You nod dumbly, tasting blood. The trench is gone, replaced by a smoking crater where 12 men had been brewing tea moments before. The survivors work in shocked silence, digging out the buried, stanching the bleeding, trying not to notice how some of the pieces don't quite fit together anymore. As dusk falls, the Germans try their luck with gas again. This time it's phosgene, more insidious than chlorine, with barely any odor. Men collapse hours later in the aid post, their lungs filling with fluid, drowning on dry land. You spend the night in a waterlogged dugout, listening to the rats argue over the day's bounty. Every shell burst, every shouted command, every groan from the wounded carves itself into your bones. Somewhere around 3 a.m., you realize with clinical detachment that you've stopped being afraid. This isn't courage, it's something far more dangerous. The morning arrives not with sunlight, but with a creeping ground fog that swirls through the trench like a living thing. You're cleaning your rifle, again, when the first scream cuts through the mist. Not the usual wounded man's cry, but something high-pitched and unending, like a rabbit caught in a trap. Shell-shocked, mutters the medic pushing past you. Third one this week. You follow the sound to a collapsed dugout where two orderlies are wrestling a young private into a straitjacket. His eyes roll wildly, spittle flying as he babbles about spiders crawling under his skin. His fingernails are torn bloody from clawing at invisible enemies. Get him to the rear before he stirs up the others, snaps the medical officer, scribbling on a clipboard. Diagnosis, NYDN. You don't need to ask what the acronym means, not yet diagnosed nervous. The Army's polite fiction for minds shattered by war. The incident casts a pall over the morning stand too. Men check their equipment with unusual intensity, avoiding eye contact. No one wants to admit they've had the same nightmares, the same moments of unreasoning terror when the world seems to tilt sideways. Breakfast is a silent affair. Cold bully beef and harder than usual biscuits that might double as trench mortars. You're picking weevils from your tea when Thomas slides down beside you, his face grim. "Mail's up," he says, tossing you a water-stained envelope. "From your sister, by the look." The letter smells faintly of lavender, an impossible scent in this place. Your sister's looping handwriting describes her work at a munitions factory, the new kittens in the barn, how she's knitting you socks with double-thick heels. Normal things. Human things. You're folding the letter carefully when the first sniper round cracks overhead. Close. Too close. Bloody hell. A corporal ducks as another bullet spangs off the trench ironwork. That's no lucky shot. They've got our range. The morning dissolves into tense cat and mouse. The German sniper, an artist with his scope, picks at any exposed head or hand. By noon, he's claimed 2 victims. One through the eye, the other through the throat when he dared light a cigarette. Counter-sniper party. The call goes up after lunch. Volunteers are offered double rum rations, a king's ransom in trench currency. You watch as 3 men set up shop in a ruined forward sap. Their bait is ingenious, a carefully painted dummy head on a stick, complete with a lit cigarette clamped in its wooden mouth. When the sniper takes the bait, his muzzle flash gives away his position. The counter-snipers work methodically. First a spotting scope to confirm, then a whispered consultation about windage. Finally, the shot, a single crack from a scoped Lee Enfield. Got the bastard. The cheer rolls down the trench. But victory is short-lived. By mid-afternoon, German artillery begins registering on your sector, ranging shots that grow increasingly accurate. The bombardment, when it comes, is textbook perfect. 15 minutes of concentrated hell that collapses 2 dugouts and buries a ration party alive. You're digging out the last survivor when the gas alarm sounds again. This time it's mustard gas, the worst of all. The oily droplets cling to everything, blistering skin through uniforms, searing lungs with delayed but deadly efficiency. Men scramble for their masks, but some are too slow. You watch in horror as a young runner, couldn't be more than 17, tears at his tunic where the gas has soaked through. His chest blooms with angry red blisters even as he screams for his mother. Nightfall brings no respite. The Germans launch a raid under cover of darkness, their stick grenades arcing through the air like deadly fireflies. The fighting is close and brutal, bayonets in the dark, pistols pressed against bodies, the wet sound of steel entering flesh. When it's over, 6 Germans lie dead in the trench, and 3 of yours will never see morning. The prisoners, 2 scared boys in oversized uniforms, are dragged away for interrogation. Get some sleep, Thomas tells you afterward, pressing a cigarette into your shaking hands. Tomorrow's another day. But as you close your eyes in your funk hole, you know he's wrong. Tomorrow isn't another day. It's the same day, repeating endlessly until the war decides it's done with you. The rain returns on the 4th day, a relentless, icy downpour that turns the trench into a slow-moving river. You're bailing water with a dented helmet when the runner slips through the mud, his message sending the officers into hushed conference. "Big push coming," Thomas murmurs, watching the lieutenant's face tighten as he reads. "They're pulling us out for briefing." The command dugout stinks of wet wool and coal smoke, its walls papered with maps marked in grease pencil. The captain, A gaunt man with a perpetual cough stands on an ammunition crate to address the assembled NCOs. Operation set for 0600 tomorrow, he rasps, tapping a map showing German lines. Our battalion leads the assault on this strongpoint. His pointer hovers over a bulge in the enemy trenches ominously labeled Machine Gun Nest 12. The details unfold with methodical horror. A 5-hour artillery barrage to soften up defenses. Gas canisters released 15 minutes before advance. Each man carries 60 pounds of gear plus scaling ladders. First wave secures the enemy parapet. Second consolidates. Someone asks about barbed wire. The captain's smile doesn't reach his eyes. The guns will cut lanes. Hopefully. Back in the trench, preparations take on a surreal quality. Men sharpen bayonets with unnatural focus. Some stitch extra padding into their uniforms where equipment chafes. A Methodist from Liverpool leads an impromptu hymn service near the latrine, his voice trembling through "Abide with me." You're issued special assault gear, extra ammunition bandoliers, 2 mils bombs, a wire cutter, and a white cloth to tie around your arm if you make it to the German trench. The quartermaster hands out rum rations early to steady the nerves. Night falls with eerie quiet. The Germans seem to sense what's coming. Their sporadic shelling stops altogether, leaving only the drumming rain. You sit with your section in a crowded dugout, passing a single cigarette back and forth, each man taking exactly 2 drags before passing it left. Remember that pub in Etaples? Thomas asks suddenly, staring at the glowing ember. The one with the barmaid who could pull pints one-handed? Nods all around. Someone recalls her name was Marie. Another swears she had a tattoo of a rose. The stories grow more elaborate with each telling. Soon she's juggling bottles while singing opera, her hair glowing like a Renaissance Madonna. No one mentions tomorrow. At 0200, the company sergeant major makes rounds with black tea so strong it could strip paint. Get some sleep, he lies to each man in turn. You doze fitfully, dreaming of a German machine gunner with your sister's face. She's weeping as she fires, the bullets stitching holes in your chest that don't hurt, but let in terrible cold. Stand to. The shout jerks you awake. It's still pitch dark, but the trench hums with frantic energy. Men check weapons one last time, tighten bootlaces, piss against the wall. Some vomit quietly in corners. The artillery begins precisely at 0430. The first salvo shakes the ground like an earthquake, the concussions coming so fast they blend into one continuous roar. 4-5 glorious hours. The guns never slacken. High explosives to crater trenches, shrapnel to clear parapets, phosphorus to burn out dugouts. At 0530, the gas crews move up. You watch them through periscopes, shadowy figures wrestling with canisters, their masks making them look like alien insects. When the valves open, the chlorine slithers across no man's land in spectral green tendrils. 5 minutes. The call passes down the line. You're in the first wave, positioned at a jumping-off trench just behind the front line. The scaling ladders feel absurdly flimsy, like something from a medieval siege. Your mouth tastes of copper, though you haven't been hit. Fix bayonets. The metallic snick of 18 inches of cold steel locking into place. Some men whisper prayers. Others curse softly. One kid, can't be older than 17, is humming a music hall tune off key. The artillery lifts exactly at 0600. In the sudden silence, a bird actually sings somewhere. Then the whistles blow. Over the top, lads. Follow your officers. What happens next exists in fragments. The ladder wobbling as you climb. Mud sucking at your boots as you hit no man's land. The first machine gun opening up from the German second line. Someone screaming, wires not cut. A shell crater full of greenish water that saves your life when you dive in. The man next to you disappearing mid-stride. Just pink mist and flying leather. You crawl forward on elbows and knees. The mud so thick it feels like swimming. The German trench is 50 yards away. Then 40. Then 30. A bullet creases your helmet, spinning you sideways. When your vision clears, you see Thomas ahead, waving men forward through a gap in the wire. His mouth is moving, but you can't hear over the gunfire. Then his chest explodes outward in a red spray. Something breaks in you then. The last 20 yards are a blur of screaming and smoke. You're in the German trench before realizing it, bayoneting a gray-clad figure who looks as surprised as you are. The fighting is intimate and awful. Trench knives in tight corners, revolvers fired point-blank, a shovel wielded like an axe. You kill twice more before the Germans fall back. By 0630, your section holds 20 yards of captured trench. Of the 30 men who went over, 11 remain. The white cloth around your arm is spattered red. As the sun rises over no man's land, you look back at the churned earth littered with humped shapes. Some move feebly. Most don't. Thomas is out there somewhere, his letters to Manchester forever unfinished. You light a cigarette with hands that won't stop shaking and wait for the counterattack. The captured trench stinks of cordite and excrement, its floor littered with the detritus of hasty retreat. Half-eaten black bread, a shattered rifle stock, a blood-stained letter in spidery German script. You crouch behind a reversed parapet, watching the surviving members of your section drag German corpses into a makeshift barricade. The bodies are still warm. Get those machine guns turned around. The lieutenant's voice cracks with exhaustion. His left sleeve hangs empty below the elbow, the stump wrapped in a field dressing that's already soaked through. You help wrestle a captured Maxim onto the firing step, its water jacket leaking steam into the morning air. The mechanism is different from British models, more angles, less polish, but death operates the same in any language. A corporal from Birmingham who worked in a munitions factory before the war gets it functioning with 3 brutal kicks to the receiver. "Merry Christmas, you filthy Huns," he mutters, feeding in a fresh belt of ammunition. The expected counterattack comes at noon, not the disorganized rush you hoped for, but a methodical assault by stooped figures in coal scuttle helmets. They advance behind a rolling mortar barrage that walks precisely along the trench line. The first wave falls to your captured machine guns, but the second comes on with flamethrowers. You see a man from a company ignite like a torch, his screams cutting through even the artillery noise as he stumbles into a shell hole full of rainwater. The flames keep burning atop the water. By mid-afternoon, the situation is desperate. Your makeshift garrison has been reduced to 7 men holding 30 yards of trench. The dead, both British and German, are stacked like sandbags in the traverses. Ammunition is running low, and the water in the Maxim's cooling jacket is boiling away. "Runner," the lieutenant grabs a wide-eyed private. "Get back to our lines. Tell them we need reinforcements, or we're done." The boy, he can't be older than 16, nods jerkily before scrambling over the parapet. He makes it exactly 4 steps before a sniper catches him through the throat. He dies on his knees, clutching at the red fountain pulsing between his fingers, mouth working soundlessly like a landed fish. Nightfall brings a temporary respite. The Germans consolidate their positions 50 yards down the trench, close enough that you can hear them coughing and cursing. Their sentries occasionally fire blind shots down the communication safes, more to keep you nervous than with any hope of hitting someone. You're sorting through a dead German's pack for food when you find the photographs. A smiling woman holding a baby in front of a Bavarian farmhouse, an older couple posed stiffly in Sunday best, a postcard of the Alps with Wiedersehen and München scrawled on the back. The man who carried these might be the one currently serving as part of your barricade. The lieutenant catches you staring at the pictures. "Don't think about it," he says, lighting a German cigarette with steady fingers. They'd do the same to yours. At midnight, a miracle, 3 fresh platoons arrive through a communication trench you thought had been cut off. They bring ammunition, water, and most importantly, a Stokes mortar team that immediately begins dropping shells on the German positions. By dawn, the situation has stabilized enough for the walking wounded to be evacuated. You help carry the lieutenant out, his face gray with pain but still conscious. As you pass through the original British front line, now eerily quiet compared to the hell you've left, a medical officer stops you. "That arm needs seeing too," he says, pointing to the dark stain spreading down your sleeve. You hadn't even noticed the wound, a jagged piece of shrapnel embedded just above the elbow. The pain arrives belatedly, a white-hot spike that nearly drops you to your knees. The dressing station is a circus of suffering. Men moaning on stretchers, orderlies running with buckets of bloody water, a pile of amputated limbs growing in the corner like some grotesque harvest. A harried surgeon probes your wound with dirty fingers before nodding. Clean through and through. You'll keep the arm. He pours iodine directly into the hole, the burning so intense you nearly bite through your tongue. Next, you're loaded onto an ambulance bound for the casualty clearing station, your war possibly over. As the truck bounces down the ruined road, you catch one last glimpse of the front, a smudge of smoke and flame on the horizon, like the gates of hell left slightly ajar. The man on the stretcher next to yours is singing "Pack Up Your Troubles" in a soft, off-key tenor. His legs end abruptly at mid-thigh, the stumps wrapped in crimson-soaked bandages. He winks at you as the morphine takes hold. "Cheer up, mate," he slurs. "Worse things happen at sea." You close your eyes as the truck carries you away from the guns, wondering if you'll ever stop hearing them in your dreams. The casualty clearing station is a world of white tents and screaming men, the air thick with the cloying sweetness of antiseptic masking the underlying stench of pus and gangrene. You're placed on a stretcher in the open air, waiting your turn as orderlies move through the rows with clipboards, sorting the wounded with brutal efficiency. Walking wounded to Tent 3. Gas cases to the West Wing. Amputations straight to surgery. A nurse with dark circles under her eyes pauses at your stretcher, her fingers probing the blood-soaked bandage on your arm. "This one's septic," she murmurs to an orderly. "Sulfa powder and irrigation, then evacuation to base hospital." The treatment is more painful than the wound itself. They pour what feels like boiling water into the shrapnel channel, scrubbing with stiff bristled brushes that send white-hot agony shooting up to your shoulder. You black out twice during the procedure, waking each time to the nurse's impassive face as she continues scraping. "Better here than in the grave," she says by way of comfort, wrapping fresh gauze around your arm. The base hospital train arrives at dusk, a string of converted boxcars marked with red crosses. They load you into a compartment with 12 other wounded. The air soon thick with the smell of sweat, iodine, and the peculiar metallic tang of fresh blood. The train jerks into motion with a scream of brakes, carrying you further from the front than you've been in months. Through the grimy window, you watch the war recede. First the artillery flashes on the horizon, then the skeletal remains of villages, finally open countryside where farmers still guide plows behind sway-backed horses. The normality of it feels obscene. Base Hospital 17 is a requisition boarding school, its hallways echoing with the ghosts of children's laughter beneath the moans of wounded men. You're assigned a cot in a long ward where sunlight filters through gauze curtains, painting everything in a soft, unreal glow. The days take on a strange rhythm. At 6 a.m., the night nurse makes her final rounds with morphine injections for those who need it. Breakfast arrives at 7, real eggs and toast that taste like heaven after months of bully beef. Doctors make their rounds at 9, trailing medical students who gawk at the wounds like tourists at a particularly gruesome museum. Your arm begins to heal, though the infection leaves it stiff and weak. The surgeons tell you it will be months before you regain full use, if ever. The man in the next bed, a Scot missing both legs at the knee, calls this the golden wound. "Bad enough to get you out," he explains, "but not so bad you can't enjoy it." Mail arrives sporadically. Your sister's letters are full of cheerful nonsense about village gossip and her attempts at gardening. Your mother's are heavier with unasked questions, her handwriting growing shakier with each page. You write back carefully neutral replies, describing the hospital food and the view from your window, never mentioning the screams that sometimes wake the ward at night. After 2 weeks, you're deemed fit for convalescent leave. The discharge papers list your condition as GSW right arm, severe infection, combat fatigue. The last a euphemism for whatever is wrong behind your eyes when you startle awake at night, convinced the bed is full of rats. The troop shipped to England is a rusting tub that wallows in the Channel swell. You spend most of the voyage leaning over the rail, watching the white cliffs grow larger through a haze of nausea and lingering fever. When the ship docks at Dover, a brass band plays Rule Britannia on the quay, the music nearly drowned out by the crying of widows meeting caskets. The train to London is packed with civilians who stare at your uniform with a mixture of pity and discomfort. A well-dressed man offers you his first-class seat, his eyes sliding away from your still-oozing bandage. "Terrible business over there," he mutters, as if the war is some embarrassing social faux pas. You change trains at Victoria Station, where a Red Cross volunteer presses a cup of tea into your hands. It's terrible, weak and lukewarm, but you drink it anyway, watching the crowd swirl past. A group of factory girls giggle over a magazine. A vicar lectures a bored-looking boy about patriotism. A newsboy shouts headlines about another victory on the Somme. None of them seem to realize the war is real. The final leg of your journey is by local train, the kind you used to take to school. The familiar stations roll past: Westerham, Dunton Green, Sevenoaks. Each name a punch to the gut. When the train pulls into your hometown, you half expect to see your younger self waiting on the platform, untouched by war. Instead, there's just your sister, her eyes red from crying. She hugs you so tightly the wound in your arm screams protest, but you don't pull away. "Welcome home," she whispers into your shoulder. And for the first time since you climbed out of that trench, you allow yourself to believe it might be true. Home is a disorienting dream. The thatched cottage where you grew up seems impossibly small now. Its low ceilings and floral wallpaper like a dollhouse after the vast horrors of the front. Your mother fusses over your bandages, your sister tiptoes around your nightmares, and your father, who spent the Boer War guarding stores in Cape Town, can't meet your eyes when you speak of the trenches. The village is worse. At the pub, old men buy you pints and demand stories they don't truly want to hear. When you describe the time a rat stole your last biscuit, they laugh uproariously. When you mention the boy who drowned in mud, they suddenly find urgent business elsewhere. Only the vicar's daughter seems to understand. She finds you one afternoon in the churchyard, staring at the new memorial plaque listing local boys killed in France. "It's all right if you're angry," she says, arranging wildflowers by a name you recognize, Jimmy Archer, who used to cheat at marbles behind the schoolhouse. They want you to be either a hero or a victim. No one knows what to do with someone who's just broken. Your convalescence stretches through autumn. The arm heals slowly, the scar an ugly purple ridge that aches before rain. The doctors say you'll regain most movement, though you'll never throw a cricket ball again. The wounds inside are harder to assess. Some nights you wake screaming about gas attacks, sending your sister scrambling for the gas mask you insisted on keeping by your bed. Other nights are worse. You lie perfectly still, paralyzed by dreams so vivid you can smell the rotting corpses when you open your eyes. By November, the War Office declares you fit for light duty. The summons arrives on a crisp morning. Report to the Reserve Battalion at Dover for training and possible redeployment. Your mother reads the letter and bursts into tears at the breakfast table. "They can't send you back," she sobs. "Not after what they did to you." But of course they can. The Army needs bodies more than it needs souls. The training camp is a cruel parody of your first enlistment. The same scratchy wool uniforms, the same barked orders, the same smell of Brasso and boot polish. But now you move through the drills with the hollow efficiency of a man who knows exactly what awaits at the end. The new recruits watch you with a mix of awe and terror. They beg for stories, then regret it when you tell them about the latrine at Passchendaele that was just a plank over a pit of corpses. One boy, barely 18 with peach fuzz on his cheeks, vomits behind the barracks after your description of trench foot. Your sergeant, a veteran of Gallipoli with a nose like a smashed tomato, pulls you aside. "Ease up on the details, Corporal. These lads need to learn, not lose their nerve before they ship out." But you can't stop. The words pour out like pus from a lanced wound. The way a man sounds when he's gut shot, the particular stench of a gas gangrene case, how long it takes for a sniper's victim to stop twitching. It's not cruelty, it's a desperate vaccination, trying to inoculate them against the horrors you know are coming. Christmas comes and goes in a blur of cheap gin and lonelier carols. You're granted 3 days leave, But the cottage feels claustrophobic now, your family's careful avoidance of certain topics more exhausting than any march. On New Year's Eve, you find yourself at the vicarage door, drunk on sacramental wine stolen from the church basement. The vicar's daughter answers in her nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She doesn't seem surprised to see you. "They're sending me back next week." You slur, the bottle dangling from your fingers. "Back to the fucking meat grinder." She takes the wine and pulls you inside without a word. That night, in her narrow bed, you finally weep for Thomas and all the others. Great heaving sobs that feel like they'll tear you apart. She holds you through it, her fingers tracing the scar on your arm like a rosary. The return to France is worse than the first time. Now you know exactly what awaits. The mud, the rats, the arbitrary nature of death. The troopship is full of fresh-faced replacements singing "It's a Long Way to Tipperary," their voices bright with ignorant hope. You stand at the rail, watching the white cliffs fade into mist, and wonder if this is how condemned men felt marching to the gallows, knowing the rope awaits, yet putting one foot in front of the other anyway. Somewhere ahead, the guns are waiting. The front in winter is a different kind of hell, not the explosive violence of summer offensives, but a slow, grinding misery that seeps into bones. You arrive in January to find the trenches half-flooded, the duckboards floating on icy water that numbs feet within minutes. The men you're replacing look like specters, their faces gaunt under weeks of stubble, eyes dull with the thousand-yard stare you remember all too well. "Welcome to Hotel Somme," croaks a corporal with trench foot, so severe his toes show black through the bandages. "Mind the rats, they've grown bold with the cold." The handover is brisk. The outgoing battalion points out new sniper positions, unfinished mine tunnels, and the stretch of no man's land where 3 patrols vanished last month without a trace. Their lieutenant taps a map with a frostbitten finger. "Jerry's got a new trick. Wine carries gramophone music at night. Makes it hard to hear raiding parties." You take command of a section of replacements, boys mostly, their uniforms still stiff with newness. They watch you with nervous admiration, unaware you're just as terrified as they are. The first night, one asks how you got your scar. "Shrapnel at Delville Wood," you say, omitting how you woke to find the man next to you disemboweled by the same blast. The winter routine sets in. Mornings spent chipping ice from rifle bolts, afternoons repairing collapsed trench walls, nights on sentry duty with frost forming on your eyelashes. The cold is a more persistent enemy than the Germans. It steals into dugouts, freezes water bottles solid, and turns untreated trench foot into a death sentence. A new horror arrives in February, flamethrower teams. The Germans use them at dawn, posing liquid fire across forward saps. You lose 5 men your first week to them. Their charred remains indistinguishable except by dog tags melted into the flesh. The replacements learn fast or die faster. Young Harris lasts 3 days before a sniper catches him peeking over the parapet. Peterson freezes during his first gas attack and drowns in his own lungs. But others adapt. Jenkins masters the periscope rifle, Wilson develops an uncanny knack for predicting shell fire, and the whole section learns to sleep through bombardments that would have sent them screaming months ago. You write letters to the vicar's daughter with increasing frequency, your pencil strokes digging deep into the paper as you describe everything you couldn't say to your family. The way moonlight glints on frozen corpses, the sound a bayonet makes entering flesh, the particular shade of blue a man turns from gas. She writes back with equal honesty, her letters smelling faintly of lavender and church incense. March brings the thaw, and with it, the mud. The trenches become viscous traps, swallowing men whole if they misstep. Rations dwindle as supply wagons bog down miles behind the lines. The Germans seem equally miserable. Their sniper fire grows erratic, their raids less frequent. One clear night, you catch strains of music from the German lines. Not the usual propaganda waltzes, but a mournful cello piece. It floats across no man's land with eerie clarity, silencing even the rats. Your sentries lower their rifles, listening. Someone whispers, "That's Bach." For 3 minutes, the war stops. Then a British artillery battery ruins it all with a barrage that sends the musicians scrambling. April fools no one with its promises of renewal. The generals are clearly planning something big. Survey teams appear daily. Officers pore over maps, and rumors swirl of a big push come summer. The replacements chatter excitedly about breaking the stalemate. The veterans exchange knowing glances. You find yourself staring at the vicar's daughter's latest letter one evening, tracing the words where she's written about planting early peas in the vicarage garden. The paper is suddenly blurry, not from rain or trench damp, but from tears you didn't realize you were shedding. The company sergeant major finds you like that, your shoulders shaking silently. He doesn't comment, just hands you a flask of medicinal brandy and sits beside you in the mud. Going to be a hot summer, he says at last, staring at the German lines. It's not a weather report. You nod, folding the letter carefully into your breast pocket, right over your heart. Somewhere, peas are pushing through dark earth toward sunlight. Here, you dig deeper into mud, waiting for the guns to tell you when to die. The summer offensive begins not with a bang, but with a piece of bureaucratic absurdity. You're summoned to Battalion HQ where a freshly starched staff officer pins a military metal ribbon to your chest. The same wound that almost killed you now polished into a decoration. His speech about gallantry under fire drowns in the rumble of artillery moving up. Operations set for July 1st. The sergeant major tells you afterward, spitting into a puddle where the reflection of observation balloons floats like bloated corpses. We go over at 0730. Preparations take on a grotesque carnival atmosphere. Trench mortars arrive, painted with names like Bosch Blaster and Kaiser's Kiss. A Methodist chaplain holds communion using an ammunition crate as an altar, the wafers sticking to men's trembling palms. Someone smuggled in a crate of peaches, real ones, golden and sun-warmed from God knows where. That tastes like childhood summers. The night before the attack, the Germans bombard the reserve lines with gas shells. You watch from an observation post as the greenish mist drifts through support trenches, swallowing the screams of unprepared troops. The wind shifts at midnight, sparing your sector by sheer dumb luck. Dawn breaks blood red. The final bombardment is the loudest thing you've ever heard. Not individual explosions, but one continuous, earth-splitting roar that vibrates in your teeth. For 5 minutes, it seems impossible anything could survive in the German trenches. Then the guns lift, the whistles blow, and 30,000 men climb ladders into the sunlight. What follows is not war, but slaughter. The German machine guns, untouched by the barrage, cut the first wave to ribbons before they've gone 10 yards. You see the first lead's pals disappear into a storm of bullets like wheat before a scythe. A shell bursts prematurely overhead, showering your section with shrapnel that kills 3 men instantly. Somehow you keep moving forward, herding your surviving replacements toward a crater halfway across no man's land. The ground is carpeted with writhing wounded, men clutching at spilled intestines, others screaming for mothers, a few sitting upright with no visible wounds, but their tunics darkening from internal bleeding. Stay down. You roar as a replacement named Callow tries to stand. The bullet takes him through the temple before the words fully leave your mouth. By noon, the attack has clearly failed. The few units that reach the German trenches are being systematically exterminated. You watch through binoculars as a handful of survivors try to surrender, only to be bayonet against the parapet. Nightfall brings a macabre reprieve. The German guns fall silent, perhaps out of pity or simply exhaustion. You lead 7 shell-shock survivors back through the corpse-choked wasteland, stepping carefully around the dying, who still occasionally moan or clutch at your ankles. The dressing station is a charnel house. A surgeon works bare-armed in a lake of blood, his boots making wet sucking sounds with every step. He glances at your group and shakes his head, walking wounded to the rear. Everyone else, try not to bleed on my floor. Back in the reserve trench, someone hands you a mug of tea so sweet it makes your teeth ache. You're staring at the steam when a runner arrives with orders. The battalion is to reform and attack again at dawn. Someone begins laughing hysterically. It takes you a full minute to realize it's you. The second attack never comes. At midnight, a staff officer slips in the mud carrying the revised orders. The assault is postponed indefinitely. The remnants of your battalion are pulled back to a reserve trench littered with the detritus of earlier waves. Discarded helmets, blood-stained letters, a single polished boot standing upright like a grave marker. For 3 days, you exist in a limbo of exhaustion and shock. The replacements who survived now have the 1,000-yard stare of veterans. They clean their rifles with robotic precision, jump at sudden noises, and wake screaming from dreams where they're drowning in mud. You don't bother comforting them. Empty platitudes won't stop German bullets. On the 4th day, the lieutenant, his left sleeve neatly pinned where his arm used to be, calls you to what's left of Battalion HQ. The dugout smells of wet earth and carbolic. A map spread across an ammunition crate with red arrows stabbing toward German lines. Division wants a prisoner, he says, tapping a section of trench labeled MG Nest 7. Intel thinks they've got new gas canisters. You're taking a patrol tonight. The mission is simple madness. Crawl through no man's land. Avoid the German listening posts. Snatch a sentry from his own trench. The kind of operation that gets men killed for a general's whim. You pick your team carefully. Wilson for his uncanny hearing, Jenkins for his knife work, and 2 new replacements who haven't yet learned enough to be terrified. The rest you dismiss with a lie about light beauties. Let them have one more night of ignorant peace. The patrol moves out at 0200 under a new moon. No man's land is eerily quiet, the usual artillery silent for once. You navigate by memory and the occasional flare, skirting shell holes where water glimmers like mercury over drowned men. At the German wire, Jenkins goes to work with cutters. The snip of each strand sounds like a gunshot in the stillness. You're halfway through when Wilson freezes, a sentry's footsteps approaching along the trench. The plan dissolves into chaos. The sentry spots the cut wire and shouts an alarm. Jenkins slits his throat in one smooth motion, but the damage is done. Flares burst overhead, turning night into garish daylight as machine guns open up from both flanks. Go, go. You shove the nearest replacement toward the German trench. Better a quick death there than being caught in the open. He makes it 2 steps before a bullet folds him in half. Wilson takes a burst to the chest, his body dancing like a marionette. Somehow you and Jenkins drag one stunned German back through the wire. A boy no older than 16, his face smeared with blood from a scalp wound. He keeps repeating the same phrase over and over. Mutter, bit, mutter. The return journey is a nightmare of crawling over your own dead, the Germans sobbing as bullets whip overhead. When you finally tumble into your trench, the lieutenant takes one look at the prisoner and sighs. Christ, we're sending children to catch children now. The intelligence officer arrives at dawn, his uniform miraculously clean. He seems disappointed when the prisoner can't, or won't, reveal anything useful. They take the boy away, his whimpers fading down the communication trench. Jenkins finds you cleaning Wilson's blood from your bayonet. Worth it? He asks, lighting a cigarette with steady hands. You don't answer. The question is its own indictment. The infection returns in August, not with the fiery agony of the original wound, but as a slow creep of redness from scar tissue, the flesh turning tender and hot to the touch. By the time you report to the aid post, the fever has you shaking so badly they have to strap you to the stretcher. The field hospital is overflowing with some casualties. They lay you on the floor between 2 dying men, one silently crying pink tears from gas burns, the other humming a lullaby through shattered teeth. A nurse with a cracked monocle presses a chloroform rag over your face, her voice floating down as consciousness fades. Back to Blighty with you, lucky devil. You wake to the shudder of a hospital ship, your body strapped to a bunk that sways with the channel swell. The man above you whispers the Lord's Prayer on endless loop, his remaining leg suspended in a web of pulleys. Sunlight filters through portholes, painting arabesques on the bulkhead that almost disguise the bloodstains. England emerges from the haze like a half-remembered dream. Green cliffs, white houses, roads where no corpses rot in ditches. The train to the convalescent hospital smells of lavender polish and carbolic, so clean it makes your nose sting. They give you a bed by the window overlooking a rose garden. For weeks you exist in a pleasant morphine haze, watching petals drift onto manicured lawns. The vicar's daughter writes every other day, her letters filled with village gossip and pressed wildflowers that still smell of summer. You trace the words with your fingertips, but your hands shake too badly to hold a pen in reply. October brings medical boards and stern men with clipboards. They test your grip strength, peer at your pupils, and ask questions designed to trap you into admitting weakness. Do you have nightmares, Corporal? Do loud noises distress you? Can you account for these 3 days missing from your service record? You answer as expected, no, and must have been the trench fever, sir. They stamp your papers with a verdict that surprises no one. Permanent home service. Not fit for further combat duty. The discharge process is eerily similar to enlistment. Same echoing halls, same queues of men, even some of the same posters peeling from the walls. Only now you leave with a pension instead of a promise. Your service record stamped with the one word that matters. Demobilized. The train home stops at every village, each station crowded with women in black and children clutching toy soldiers. At the last stop, your sister waits alone on the platform, her smile not quite hiding the new lines around her eyes. She hugs you carefully, avoiding the still tender scar. "Welcome home," she says, as if you've merely been away at school. The cottage is smaller than you remember, the ceiling lower, the smells of baking bread and beeswax almost overwhelming after years of cordite and decay. Your mother fusses over your place settings, your father talks too loudly about the weather, and no one mentions the way you still startle at backfiring cars. That night, standing in the garden under a sky unpolluted by flares, you realize with dull surprise that you missed the war. Not the terror or the filth, but the terrible clarity of purpose. The simplicity of surviving another day when all other concerns have been stripped away. A barn owl cries from the churchyard. Somewhere down the lane, a baby wails. Life goes on in this quiet corner of England, as if the trenches were merely a bad dream. You take a deep breath of the damp night air, tasting soil and apple blossoms instead of mud and lyddite. The vicar's daughter was right. They'll never understand. And for the first time, you're glad of it.